Hello, and welcome back to the Chicks in Construction podcast. I'm your host, Mikki Paradise, and our co-host for the day is Heather Lane. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Mikki, thanks for inviting me to come to your podcast today. I'm excited to be here. I have been in residential real estate sales here in the Triangle for over 20 years. I relocated here in 1997, which makes me sound really darn old. But,
well, it also makes you like officially Southern, I think. Like there's a period of time where then you're officially Southern.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself officially Southern because I would never, ever go back to North. Even though it's nice to visit for like 2 days of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started out in new construction way back in the day. And in 2003, I went into general brokerage and have been selling homes, as my fiance says, slinging homes.
Slinging homes.
All across the Triangle ever since. And I love it. Yeah.
You were in it during the recession and all that.
Yes.
Anytime I meet anybody in real estate that's been doing it since pre-recession, I'm like, you got the chops. That's legit. I survived. I had just started my company a couple years before the recession. So I started my company in 2005 and survived it. Really just
not really too much before the recession.
Yeah, no. I think it was just because I had so little overhead. Like I could just get by with nothing for a while. So yeah, that's wild. But that's awesome. I love that. I always love meeting people who really enjoy real estate.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of people that get into it because they think there's a lot of money in it. And I'm sure it is. Like, why do anything if it's not?
Right.
But
it's a grind.
Love it. Yeah.
It can be a grind. I loved it. One of the reasons I loved it was because when I had my kids, they really didn't even know that I had a career because I was there when they went to school. I was there for all their little learning experiences. I was there when they got off the bus, and I was able to work my real estate business around them, which was, at the time, the most important thing. So now that they're grown, I can just
grown and traveling the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Come back as one of your kids in my next life.
I have nothing to do with it. They're on their own.
So the reason that I brought Heather on today is due to a homeowner horror story. So this one is one that is I was a little more involved in than just somebody wrote in and told us the story. So back in 2002, a friend of mine bought a home, and it was kind of the quintessential homeowner nightmare. You buy a new home. It was a little bit over your budget. You're kind of house poor, but it was like the dream home. They were pregnant. So this is where they're going to welcome their first child into the world. And almost as soon as they moved in, they started having problems. So it was water intrusion into the house. Every single time it rained, water was coming in through the windows. Water was coming in. There was water coming out of their light fixture in one of their bedrooms because above it was a very modern home. And so it had one of those balconies with, a drywall ceiling underneath it. So if that's not properly sealed, water is penetrating that. So every time it rained, it was kind of their nightmare. And no matter what they did, they couldn't figure out what it was. And so they were very trusting that I think when they saw the house, they called the number on the sign. And I guess where this house is located, a real estate agent can represent both the buyer and the seller.
That is
also
true here as well.
Okay, so
not recommended.
Yeah,
but true.
We're gonna get into that. Into why that's not recommended. They called the number that was on the sign, and obviously, when you're buying a house, you trust your realtor. When you're not in construction, you don't know the number for a home inspector.
Exactly.
So that's what your realtor provides you.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know anything. Yeah. And you get a whole lesson. And when you have the right realtor, they really are looking out for your best interest. I remember when the people moved in next door, a realtor can be a little overzealous. And they did a survey, and apparently my fence was 3/4 of an inch on their property.
Oh yeah, I've had that happen.
And what was hilarious about it was the actual homeowners who really have become me and my husband's very good friends could have cared less. They had absolutely no problem with it. But the realtor, who was very new to it, was demanding that I either move my fence or give them my fence. Sign
an easement agreement. Yeah.
And I was like, I'm a little spicy. I know. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. But over 3/4 of an inch,
that is a small amount.
It
like
was
3 inches, I would
it was
understand
so
maybe. But
insignificant. Like, and it wasn't even the whole fence. It was just the corner. Because the way the lot is, it's weird. It's not like a straight line. And so I almost built a fence down so that I would never have to see them again. And I was really glad that I didn't, because when I actually talked to them about it, they were like, oh, no, we don't care.
Yeah.
But a realtor that will zealously and sometimes overzealously represent you is better than a realtor that is actually not representing you at all.
Yes.
So this guy keeps reaching out to his realtor because that's kind of his only point of contact.
Who is also the seller's realtor.
Also the seller's realtor. This realtor provided the person that do their home inspection, which went back with no problems. So the home inspection came back and it was perfect. But what's wild to me is I actually went to the home as a GC and brought a whole team of people to do this massive inspection on the home. We brought a stucco specialist because the house had stucco, which is weird.
Yeah.
In the non-Florida South, we don't have a lot of stucco. So it was kind of strange that there was stucco. And so I brought this whole team and we just walked in and you could see areas where a realtor would have been like,
yeah,
this is weird. Like,
let
there was
alone
a
a home
literal
inspector.
gap on the inside of their home. There was a gap where you could see the framing. And I was like, and I'm looking at it going, wait, what? As it would turn out, this poor dude ends up having to completely remove all of the stucco siding. It was all installed improperly. Due to that improper installation, major structural members of the house had been rotting and had rotted to the point where they were not safe. So they had a set of stairs on the back of the house that led to the mother-in-law suite that they immediately had to stop using because upon our inspection, those stairs were about this close for the bolts to be pulling through the framing because the framing had completely rotted out.
Was there mold? I would imagine there would probably be mold too with all that water coming in.
You know, I think because it was like getting wet and drying and getting wet and drying, luckily that was one problem they didn't have, but there was a ton of rot. There was so many structural issues. And then the other issue was they had these very modern, like everybody loves a rooftop deck.
Yeah.
So they had a rooftop like patio off their master. And let me tell you, it was a chef's kiss. I mean, the house, like I get it. Like I'd have bought that house.
Yeah.
Because it's gorgeous, but the floors weren't properly installed. And so every time it rained, the ceiling below wherever these porches were was just getting rocked with drywall. So the guy keeps reaching out to his realtor and the realtor is providing like all these home people, like repair people, and they come out and they tell them, we're telling him what the problem was, but then they weren't actually fixing it. So finally he reaches out to me and he's like, hey, listen, I don't know what's going on, but these people keep coming and we've paid thousands of dollars thinking that the problem's been fixed. And every single time it rains, this keeps happening. And so like, will you just come out and take a look? And so I literally drove quite a distance because it's not North Carolina. It was unbelievable what we found. So after we did our report, we kind of started to question the home inspection report because it was like the time period between when we showed up and when they moved in was not enough time for
all these things
to have happened. So my first thing was, what happened with the home inspection? And also, why did none of the contractors that came in accurately identify the problem? So we did some digging and in an unofficial, can't take it to court kind of way, found out that the realtor who was representing both the seller and the buyer was really good friends with the sellers and had brought the home inspector in, and the home inspector had gotten a little something on the side to make that report look like there was absolutely no problems. And in that state and in many states, I'm not sure about North Carolina, a home inspector can't be held accountable for missing anything or inaccurate information. So didn't matter even if
It's very limited.
Yeah, it's very limited.
Because it says in their agreement, this is a limited visual inspection.
Yeah.
And it goes on to say, if you want a full inspection, that means we have to bring in a structural engineer, an architect, and other people. And it's going to cost you $2,500 instead of $400.
Y'all pay the $2,500.
You know, home inspectors, they tell you in that agreement exactly what the limitations are. They don't talk about code. They're not supposed to talk about how things can be fixed or give any recommendations. They do give recommendations on if your HVAC has a possible problem. They say recommend having an HVAC contractor to come in, or recommend having a structural engineer come in, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if they do that, do that.
Right.
Don't skimp on your inspections.
Fine.
Yeah, it's not fine.
Well,
even if it is fine, find out.
Well, that's the thing, is what's so crappy about the situation is none of these problems were on this home inspection report. And so that kind of got me going, all right, we need to start investigating what's going on. And so that's how we found out about this relationship, the close relationship between the sellers and the listing agent. Then kind of, when you're in construction, like, you know the places to go to find out the things to find out.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, that inspector's totally on the take. Like, you can pay him $100 to say whatever you want on the inspection report. And again, because there's no consequences, like, what are they going to do to him? So then it went so far as to even the contractors that real estate agent was recommending was intentionally telling them to not tell the homeowner what the actual problem was.
Oh my gosh.
And because none of them were actual licensed GC, they were kind of like handymen. They didn't have any consequences to not tell them what it was. And so this story is an absolute nightmare. They had to reside the entire house, which is a really large house. It was a crazy amount of money, which means when you reside a house, you repaint a house. They had to fix all the structural damage, hundreds of thousands of dollars after they spent a whole lot of money on this house, had to go into even just structurally sound. It took probably about a year, maybe 2 years for them to fully get all of the problems taken care of. When I was talking about this story, I talked to a couple different people, like who would be the best person to bring in to be the expert for the podcast. And I was like, Heather, because what we try to do in Chicks in Construction podcast is help you guys understand like where the point of failure was so that you don't have the same problem. And the point of failure in this story was using the listing agent as the buyer's representative. So that's where I was like, we got to bring Heather in. She's got to tell everybody like the do's and don'ts and the whys and why nots.
Dual agency, which is what you're talking about, is legal in North Carolina. There are several different ways that buyers can be represented in North Carolina. And with dual agency, basically the North Carolina Real Estate Commission says that if two agents work for the same company, even, that can be a conflict of interest. So I'm with Keller Williams Preferred. If my friend Susan has a listing and I go and bring a buyer to it, the Real Estate Commission wants you to understand that Susan and I could be in cahoots as well, since we're in the same company.
Right.
Now, in reality, if you are an above board agent, you and Susan are not in cahoots. And
there's no cahoots if you're above board. We're not cahoots.
There's no cahoots. But 99% of agents are above board. And you wouldn't want to have your client not be able to view any listings that are listed with your company.
Right.
So if your client says no to dual agency completely, they're not able to do that because they're saying, we don't want to take the risk that you and Susan are in cahoots.
Right.
So we only want to look at listings that are listed with other companies.
And with a company as large as Keller Williams, that kind of does...
It does them a disservice. Yeah, definitely does them a disservice. What you're talking about is true dual agency where one person represents the buyer and the seller, and that is a very dangerous form of dual agency, in my opinion. What you can do, what I could do and do, if I have a listing and someone calls and says, I want to see it, I will show it to them if they don't have a buyer's agent. But then if they decide they want to make an offer, then what I would probably do, and come to think of it, I'd probably do this in the beginning, just call someone from my company and say, Susan, I have this person who wants to see my listing. Can you show it to them? Can you write an offer for them? That way they have their own representation.
Right.
You don't get into these situations. And it's honestly a risk for the agent too, because if this buyer comes back and says, you did this or you didn't do this, then you can be sued. You can lose your license or have sanctions. So it's just risky for everyone. These buyers that you're talking about, they didn't know what they didn't know. They just happened to get an agent who was not above board.
Yeah.
You really need to have a home inspector that has been in the business for a long time. Even if you have an agent who you trust, just take a look at the home inspector's record just to make sure.
How do you do that?
You can go online and search their license. You can, you can look. A lot of them will have reviews online, just like anybody else.
Yeah.
Now, of course,
yeah.
Google
reviews.
Yeah.
People get crazy.
Yeah, they do get crazy sometimes. Take them with a grain of salt. But if your agent is recommending a home inspector to you and you go online and you find something negative, take it to your agent and be like, hey, I saw this.
Yeah.
How long have you been working with this person? And if they still say, no, they're awesome, that was a one-time thing, or that was just a disgruntled whoever, that's one thing. But yeah, you definitely need to have your own representation. And the other thing is you want to have representation from someone experienced, someone full-time, someone who does this on a day-to-day basis, not someone who has a job out at SAS and sells real estate on the side. And I've got a little story about that. And this is kind of a funny story. I had a listing, this was like 10 years ago. I had a listing where my sweet seller she had a very specific type of decor. And this was back in probably 2005, maybe. She liked all the beaded light fixtures and the very ornate mirrors and things like that.
All right.
So
she was fancy.
She was fancy.
She was Southern bougie.
Yeah, she was. She was Southern bougie.
Southern bougie.
Exactly right.
All right.
And her husband clearly did not care because he just let her do whatever. As he should.
He's like, our bathroom is pink and I'm fine with that.
I'm here for it. As long as you're happy, honey. So when we went to sell, this guy came in. He actually came to my open house. And he was like, oh, I'm looking for my brother who's an investor. He's like, we'd have to get rid of all these things. And I'm like, yeah, it's her decor.
It's her style.
So he makes an offer. And the offer, now our contract has changed a little bit, so this wouldn't be necessarily so much of a thing, but it used to have a very confusing fixtures section where it laid out all the fixtures that were included with the house. Basically anything that's screwed in, you got to leave it there.
Yeah.
But it kind of was a double negative, like, it said everything is included except, and then you would lay out, like, if your Aunt Sally's chandelier was in the dining room and you wanted to take it, that's where you would put, that is going with us.
Yeah.
So when he wrote the offer, he wrote everything included except, and then he laid out all the light fixtures, all the mirrors. So
he expected them to remove them from the property.
He was saying that they could remove them from the property. And so I
had to, kind of.
Well,
if it's in the contract, if they had agreed to it, had to. Oh, my Lord.
So I tell her that, and she's like, great. I spent a lot of money on this stuff. I wanted to take it with me. And I'm like, cool. So the week before closing, I'm at a funeral in West Virginia.
Oh, man.
And the guy calls me and he says, we have a problem. I just went and did our final walkthrough and all the fixtures are gone.
For your request, sir.
Yeah. In my mind, I'm like, oh my God, did I mess this up? Like, did I look at it? Because I don't have the contract in front of me.
Right.
I'm like 5 years into the business at this point. I'm like, did I look at it wrong? Because I knew it's like kind of a double negative weird thing. You have to like really think about it when you put it in. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure you said that those could go. And I hung up and I'm like, I'll check the contract. I checked it and no, I was right that they could take it.
Yeah.
And I called him back and told him, and he was like, you knew what I meant. What are you talking about? I said, you came to the open house.
You knew what I meant.
Yeah, you came to the open house. You told me your brother was going to buy as an investment property and that you would have to change these things. So when this contract came through,
it
I
made
assumed
sense.
it makes total sense. He's like, I'm going to call the attorney's office. He thought like I was trying to pull something on him. I'm like, dude, you wrote the contract. I didn't. Did you want me to bring it up to you or check with you and make sure?
I want one of my contracts.
Yeah.
I want to like have like a mistake in one of my $3 million drywall contracts and be like, well, you know what I meant.
Yeah,
see how far that goes.
Or was I supposed to say, are you sure this is what you wanted? And I found out that he was a part-time agent. Thank God the investor was his brother, or he would have probably been in really big trouble.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the attorney's office called me and they were like, the contract is what it is. So I'm like, I know.
You were like, yeah, it's because this was my full-time job. I'm well aware of what the contract says.
Yeah. So the moral of that story is kind of a funny story, but not funny to him. And if he would have had an agent who knew what they were doing, he would have not been in that situation. So
when somebody they're a first-time home buyer, or even to our area, they're first-time home buyers to our area, what do they look out for? Because I think people don't know what is a red flag when it comes to a realtor.
When it comes to a realtor, well, it's hard to know.
But what are good questions to ask? Like, so if you're interviewing a realtor, what are great questions to ask so that you can suss out, like, do you have a side hustle? Like, is this your main hustle?
Yes. I would ask, how long have you been in the business? Is this your full-time job? What is the service area you typically work in? If someone asks me to sell them a house in Mebane, I'm going to really think about whether I want to do that or not. If it's new construction, I'll probably do it.
Yeah.
Because new construction is new construction, basically.
Right.
But if they really want something specific or out of the ordinary, I'm just going to refer them to someone who works in that area. Ask them how many houses they've sold in the last year. Ask them if they work with more buyers or more sellers. Sometimes if you find someone who does a lot of listings, maybe they're not up to date on some of the loan programs and some of the things that go on with buyers need.
Oh, I've definitely had that happen to me. We were looking for land in the mountains and got strapped with this kid who didn't know anything about anything. And once we finally found somebody else, it was like, man, we probably lost 3 or 4 houses because this guy didn't know anything about different loans that were about different banks. It's like that one bank doesn't do that kind of loan, but there's 5 others that do. And it was like, I didn't know. What you don't know.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's important. Just go with like the Realtor app, like realtor.com. They match you up with realtors. I don't recommend that because I think a lot of times those are people that are new to the business that are taking those.
They're people that are paying for the business. Sometimes they're new to the business. Sometimes it can be big teams who have the money to pay for those leads.
Okay.
The best thing is a personal referral. One of your friends who's used a realtor that they like, you kind of have to see how you vibe with them too. I have had people that I have just not wanted to work with.
Yeah.
It happens. And sometimes it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or they're a bad person, but you're just not their people.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. I bought an investment property once. I went with a referral from a friend. And it was like 2 days into this, I was like, actually, it's not.
Yeah.
And then they still use this guy to this day. They love this guy.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, he just wasn't a fit for me. Everybody's different. Like everybody kind of has different like levels of risk, like has different levels of like, well, I'm going to ask for this or like, because some people will be like, do not offer under asking, but a lot of people want to bargain and that's sometimes a bad idea. But
sometimes it is. Sometimes it can be good. It depends on the house, the market, the neighbor. It depends on so many things. So sometimes you can really shoot yourself in the foot doing that. If you offer too low, then you just make the sellers mad and they don't come down as much as they would if you had offered closer to full price.
So with the market, the way that it is right now, like what's your advice for homeowners? Is there any like tips and tricks that you have for people? Because I know the market's really limited right now.
It is limited. A lot of sellers, it's called the golden handcuffs, which is that 3% interest rate.
Yeah.
And they can't go anywhere. They got the golden handcuffs. So,
I would never sell this house because I don't think anybody in their right mind would buy it. Like, listen, I've got a 200-pound English Mastiff and he's not the first one that's lived in this house. Like, I'd probably just have to burn it to the ground. But I'm in that same situation. Like
Yeah.
when I'm like a 2 point something, I will pay this house off. Like,
yeah, exactly. So that is contributing to very low inventory.
Yeah.
Because people are only moving for
like work.
One of my
Because they
friends
have
says
so much money.
the 3Ds: death, divorce, and a job.
The job. Yeah.
Yes.
We had somebody who moved into a house a couple of houses down. Lovely people, but they just have more money than sense. You wouldn't have bought that house if you had sense.
Yeah.
And so they've spent so much money putting into this house, and we just kind of watch like every day. It's like something new, and we're just like, well, if you got it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're in that position. So there's lower inventory. What about the new construction? Is like new construction picking up, or is it tricky?
It's definitely picking up. New construction is doing great right now. And it's because they're offering incentives on interest rate buy downs.
Oh.
Yeah. I was just at a neighborhood yesterday and they were offering up to $18,000 towards interest rate buy downs.
Wow.
Yeah. So that can get, especially like first time home buyers, into a house at a rate of in the 5s rather than in the mid 6s, which makes a huge difference. I just had some first time home buyers last month who went under contract on new construction, and they got, I think it was like 10,000. But then there was another neighborhood that we looked at that was also offering like $18,000 or $20,000 in incentives. So they are selling.
So I was watching one of your videos the other day, and you were talking about the importance of, because when you go to some of these new construction neighborhoods, they've got agents on duty, and they definitely want you to use their agent on duty. And there's all kinds of incentives to use their agent on duty. But it seemed like your video was like,
yeah, you definitely, it's the same situation as what you're talking about. That agent on site represents the seller, no matter how nice they are, no matter how wonderful they are, no matter what they tell you they're going to give you. Let me tell you, I have a lot of really great relationships with a lot of them. They're great people, but they don't represent you. Their duty is to the seller, the builder. You need to have someone who represents you in case of many situations that come up. I've had tons of situations over the years where if the buyer did not have an agent, they would have taken something or just closed on something that was subpar. Always get a home inspection on your new construction as well. People are like, why do I need a home inspection on new construction? I have more issues come up with new construction than I do with existing homes sometimes.
I believe it.
I had one where they had like a concrete porch and it was not sloped correctly. And the builder was
going to
the house. Yeah, the builder was like, oh, no, it's fine. It's just fine. It's fine. Everything's fine here. Don't look at that. Everything's fine.
It looks good from my house.
Yeah, exactly. The home inspector said it wasn't fine. So I called in the town of Wake Forest.
Nice.
Yeah. And Wake Forest came out and said, no, that is not fine. Sorry.
Yeah.
So if they did not have me and the home inspector,
they probably would have been like, well,
the
builder said it was fine
in their crawl space.
Oh,
because that water would have been going towards their porch and down.
The water intrusion, I'm finding the more and more we're kind of collecting these homeowner horror stories, the water is the biggest issue. It's the most destructive. It's the most expensive. Sometimes it's the hardest to get any help with, like from your insurance company.
It's complicated.
Yeah. So that is a super huge issue. I was definitely thinking about some of the things you were saying in the video about like having somebody there to keep the seller agent in check or to keep the GC in check, the builder in check, as far as like, this is what we agreed on. That's not what's in the house. There's so many things. I don't do new construction, single family. We do multifamily. Just even in that, there's builders or owners will bring in their own owner representatives to check the GCs.
Yeah.
That like level of
oversight.
Like, I'm watching what you're doing. It really is important. And honestly, if my friend hadn't just called the number on the sign and had somebody represented them, that really, because I think one of the things too that I was really surprised by was if I can walk in your house and see holes in your windows, isn't that something that you would have been like, hey guys? Like,
yes, I would have definitely had a question mark and asked. They obviously didn't disclose any of these things.
They did. That was the issue. There was no disclosure. And so they actually did try to sue. I guess proving non-disclosure is a lot harder.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult unless you just luck into some kind of inside information.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to prove someone knew about something.
Yeah.
Now, if you walk in and you see something, you got to say that before they even make an offer on the house.
Right.
And maybe even get someone to come in and look at it, a GC, a home inspector, before you even make an offer. I don't know what the situation is with disclosure in that state, but in this state, there's a huge long disclosure statement that we fill out for every property. It's not on the honor system because you are bound to disclose anything you know, but who says what you know? So, but if you're a listing agent, you should know when you go through this house.
Right.
I would think the listing agent would be more likely to be able to be sued than the homeowner, because the listing agent should have reasonably known some of those things just by visually looking at them.
That was the thing to me that I was like, man, obviously a realtor is not a builder, but a realtor spends a lot of time inside houses. And knows
enough to be able to see a red flag like that.
Knows what's on the up and up. And it's just like, I remember seeing these gaps in his window and just being like, nobody pointed this out to you. And I don't blame the homeowner, because it's like, listen,
they don't know.
They don't know.
It's not their job to know.
Right. And that's the thing. For you homeowners, it's not your job to know. Now, listen, if you see a gap in between your window and you can see the framing, like, you might want to just on your own be like, hey, am I supposed to be able to see the insulation? Because the answer is no, you're not. But again, one of them is a doctor and one of them is in marketing. It's just like,
they don't know.
They're not looking at that going, oh, that's a problem. They're just like, look at this amazing house. And it was like very aesthetically beautiful. So I think a lot of times people get kind of lost in those things and they miss those finer details, which is what you bring in a professional realtor to do.
And that's what I tell my clients when we're walking through a house. You're looking at all those things. I'm looking at the bad things. I'm looking at the potential red flags. You're looking at the pretty cabinets, all the upgrades. And I'm like, let's go look at the crawl space and see what that looks like. And is the floor even? And what is that stain in the ceiling? Things like that. So that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I get a lot of calls from people that are like, hey, there's cracks in my ceiling and we're going to put our house on the market and I want them fixed before we put the house on the market. And I'm like, is it because there's a structural problem? Because like, I don't really feel comfortable like helping you hide these cracks unless you know that like it's just settling. But like, I'm like, don't make me accomplice in your crime. Like, I don't need that kind of drama in my life.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, it's really important for you guys when you're home hunting to really have qualified representation. So not just going with the first realtor that some app assigns you to. I've made that mistake. Or just going with like, oh, I met this one person, and not asking a lot of questions. So really doing kind of your homework and asking questions, how many houses they've sold, and checking up on the realtor, checking up on the home inspector, making sure that you follow up on the things that do come up in the home inspection report. A lot of the things can be really benign. I've definitely had a lot of friends, because as a GC, like send me their panicked home and, oh my God, this is in red. And a lot of times it's like
safety issue.
They're like, oh God, what do we do? Some things are a much bigger issue. And some things are not. I will say, like, those home inspection reports can sometimes be really scary and really intimidating. But the whole point is to bring them to a licensed general contractor who has a plethora of resources. Like, if there is an HVAC issue, they can bring out an HVAC contractor. And that is worth the money. I know it probably doesn't feel like it when you're in the middle of buying a home, and that's expensive. You're like, now I need furniture and I have to paint it and all of that. I can totally see where you don't see the value in necessarily really bringing in a licensed general contractor to look at the home inspection report, but really do.
Yeah. And I would say too, whenever I have a client who is not able to or does not want to attend the home inspection, I hate it, because even if it's the greatest house, there can be 25 items on the list.
Yeah.
And one of them is like, doorknob does not latch properly, which is nothing.
Really, literally nothing.
But when there's 25 items on the list, it still wigs people out.
Oh, yeah.
They freak out. They're like, oh my God, the house is falling down. We can't buy this house.
Yeah.
And I have to go through it with them step by step. And if you have a really good home inspector and the buyer is actually present for the inspection, they will go through it with them at the end. They will calmly discuss all of the items. They will point out which items are important and which items they are obligated to put on the report. There's always a comment when there is a certain type of stone veneer because no one apparently knows how to install this stuff correctly. Or maybe there are different rules for different areas and different products. I don't know. But every time have to put a comment on the report about the stone veneer and there's possible water intrusion with that. And if you see it and you haven't gotten any backstory, you're like, oh my God, the stone, there's going to be water behind the stone. But when you talk to the home inspector, he's going to say, this is the way it's installed in this area. This passed all the inspections and you're fine. But I have to put this in the report.
Oh, okay. So there's certain things that they just have to put on there.
Yeah, they have to put a note about polybutylene piping in every report.
That's the old Flex?
That's like the old stuff. Yeah, it was from
like
the 80s.
So it's not the metal. It was what metal upgraded to.
Yeah.
And it was still crap, but we didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
And then they went to like, I don't know, now it's PVC.
And it depends on what kind of connectors you have. And there's all kinds of things. But it's either fine or it's completely not fine.
Right.
You know, it's like it can be in a house for 30 years and you never have a leak. Or it's raining.
Your ceiling.
Yeah. And that has happened.
In the bathtub and then it ended up in the living room.
Yeah, I literally had some friends who had this huge, beautiful house in Stonebridge over off Six Forks.
Oh, that's a fancy neighborhood to see.
They had cameras in the house and they got an alert from their cameras and they literally watched their dining room ceiling fall in when they were on vacation because one of their polybutylene. Oh, I shouldn't be telling these bad stories. But yeah,
listen, we're learning. We're learning. It happens. But
it happens not often though, not often.
That is very true. I will say like this channel is really just for educating homeowners. There's just so many different levels of education. We get these kind of homeowner horror stories and it's like, okay, so what's the best person to bring in? What's the best topic to talk about in this situation?
How do you avoid these things?
Right. Like how do you avoid these things? And so we definitely want you to know, read your home inspection report. If there is this type of piping in your house, like it doesn't necessarily mean freak out. It means we just need to pay a little bit more attention to that. It doesn't mean don't buy the house. It doesn't mean the house is not a good house. It just means we need to be aware. Like I think when I bought my house, the home inspector said I had about 6 years left on the roof. And I was like, I bet I can get 12. And I just replaced my roof too. Like it was like last year. So I got a good run out of that roof. But it's about taking that stuff seriously and really just advocating for yourself in the buying process by bringing in somebody who can advocate for you. Because again, it's that thing if you don't know what you don't know. And so I know so many people who buy houses and don't do a survey.
Yes. Oh, that's a big one too.
And I'm just like, but you don't
spend the money on these things up front.
So I'm like, well, so you don't know where your land is. You're just guessing. Like you don't know if it's actually that big. Like you don't know if that's your fence or if it's the neighbor's fence.
Exactly.
So there's just a lot of things that a really good real estate agent will impress upon you that like, hey, these are things that you don't want to not spend the money on because they have the experience and they've got the 15, 20 years of experience of that one guy refused to get a survey and then found out that his neighbor's
driveway
fence,
was on his property.
That honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens.
Our driveway is a little bit on the neighbor's property. I'm like, this house is just built willy-nilly. It was like in the 60s. They were just doing whatever. Like they're like, schmervy. Like we always just want to give you guys as much information as we can. It's obviously, I always say this, we're not fear-mongering. We don't want to freak anybody out. We just want you to know a little bit more than you knew going into it. So we want you to go into the home buying experience feeling confident and feeling like I watched the Chicks in Construction podcast. I interviewed my realtor and I
looked for all the red flags.
Right. I Google searched the home inspector and we listened to the advice that they send there and we feel good about it. And listen, you could still do all that stuff and things could go one way or the other, but you're reducing your likelihood of ending up being somebody who's writing in to chicksinconstruction.com. There's a homeowner horror stories that you can just click on and it's a little forum. So you reduce your likelihood of being one of the people who's writing into the podcast and being one on the show when you follow some of the tips and tricks that we give on the podcast. So that's what we're here for. We're here for you guys. And so thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. This has been great.
I love it. And where can they follow you? Like, where can people find you? I mean, you're obviously the realtor of all realtors. So
yes, I am on Instagram. I'm actually now, I've just changed my Instagram handle.
Ooh.
I am now the Roving Raleigh Realtor.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I'm doing a little series where I'm going to be going to different places and I'll be letting people know where I'm going when I'm on my story. And, I'll be going to Wake Forest Coffee. And if you come and say hi to me, I'll buy your coffee.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Or
that's great coffee.
Yeah. Or if I'm going to Wakefield Tavern to have a drink and you show up, I'll buy your drink.
It's me. Yeah. Oh, that sounds fun. I'm going to follow you just for free drinks.
You should. You should. And then my website is heatherlanehomes.com.
Okay.
Layne.
Layne. I love that.
Yep.
So that's awesome. All right, great. So y'all, if you're in the Raleigh area, I know Wake Forest, Raleigh, Cary.
I mean, I do everything in Wake County, Franklin County, Durham, a little bit of Durham. I'm going to Rocky Mount, girl. I mean, it just depends. Like I said, it just depends on what it is. If it's a little bit further out, but definitely Wake, Franklin, Johnston counties. I'm your girl.
Okay. And listen, I vouch for her. So I'm just saying, my people, they're good people. So anyway, we're going to wrap it up, but go to chicksinconstruction.com to check out our website and you can put in your homeowner horror story if you have one and you want to share and potentially be on, in subtext, be on the show, but your story be shared with people so other people can learn from your mistakes, or maybe not even your mistakes, but just your unfortunate circumstances. So guys, thank you so much. And we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye-bye.